Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Thank you to everyone who is on the call. We are very happy that you could join us today. So as some of you are aware, we applied for the enhanced PSP license earlier in the year, and we were the first fintech to receive the PSP enhanced license. So going through the application process for us taught us a few things we believe our learnings could be helpful to any fintech that intends to apply. So during the course of this webinar, we'll shed light on our learnings during the process, any pitfalls that should be avoided. Feel free to send your questions via chat and we'll make some time to answer as many of them as possible for you. My name is Priscilla Hazel. I'm the head of enterprise business. I have with me Solis Kedesil, who is the director responsible for infrastructure, and Linda Otu, who is the country manager for Ghana. Ladies, I'm happy you could join me.
I'm happy to be here, Priscilla.
This is Linda. Thanks for having us, Priscilla.
Okay, so I think let's zoom right in. So for me, I think our first learning I would like to convey is that it's never too early to start the licensing process. I think it's important to note that this is the first time that any of us have had to apply for such a license. So there's a lot to figure out. And also for us, for the type of license that we applied for, because we had all the relevant external certifications, we expected the process to take roughly 2 months. However, that wasn't the case. I believe from when we began to when we finally submitted our document, a period of 4 months had elapsed. Even after we submitted to Bank of Ghana returned a few of the policies to us to update, which further extended our time. So for me, I'd say the first thing any PSP needs to consider in commencing the process is commencing the process ASAP, especially if you haven't already started. I think that's important because by the end of December 2020, every existing PSP should have applied and received their license. So considering how long the process takes, I think now is the best time to start.
That's a very good point, Priscilla. So I would like to add to that the second major learning we picked from this process, and that is to have clarity on why you're applying for the license and which one would suit your operational needs at that point. For us, I realized there were so many options that were on the table and we had to consider and weigh the pros and cons of each of them. So let's start by answering the question of who is a PSP.
Okay, so
Linda?
So for me, I think this became much clearer during our application process. First, if you allow me to quote from the Payment Systems and Services Act.
Feel free.
A PSP is a business that provides services to facilitate the transfer of funds from a payer to a payee using various forms of payment instruments or electronic money. For us at Nsano, since we are connected to the mobile money players, to financial institutions like the banks and savings and loans, and other players in the industry, to basically assist merchants and other businesses to be able to receive and process payments electronically, we can be classified as a PSP.
Okay, I mean, indeed, Linda, this definition definitely confirmed our need to get our license. But I remember knowing which exact license category to apply for was a bit challenging for us. We needed to consider the permissible activities per category that would give us the required authorization for the activities that align with our strategic direction here at Nsano for the next few years without having to upgrade the license in that period.
Right.
So although we have spoken about the enhanced license, I think it's important for us to make clear in this webinar that there are 5 main categories of falling under the licensing regime of the Bank of Ghana. For purposes of this webinar, we are going to focus on the 3 types that affect mostly fintechs, that is the enhanced to the medium to the standard PSP license. Now, I would say that whilst Priscilla has talked about the pros of having the enhanced license, it came with additional responsibilities in terms of having to bear liability if there were any infractions on our services. But aside from that, we had to look at the fact that the process for the enhanced license was pretty involving and time consuming. So in starting this process, you would have to compare and just put this to where you want to go strategically and see if it is the right license for you at a particular point in time. So we will share the link in the chat section so that all of you can view the various categories out there and what the permissible activities are, what it allows you to do by gaining that license type.
Okay, Solis. I think this brings us to our next learning, which is on corporate governance structure. So for Priscilla and Solis, I think all this talk about the permissible activities, it just reminds me of BOG's interest in our corporate governance and structure. I found it quite interesting that our internal structures really mattered in this whole process. One would have thought that probably the licensing process, it's all about liquidity or the infrastructure of the company. I don't know if you remember, we had to submit our secondary school certificates whilst completing, the mandatory director personal questionnaires.
Yeah, I remember that. I personally remember not being able to trace it. I did not know where it was. Yeah. So just thank God for mothers, because she had to pull it out from somewhere.
Right. And I remember Solis also saying that the uncle called asking, "Hey, Uncle Key, what trouble have you gotten yourself into?"
Very true. I mean, they are very thorough in their process. So the national security apparatus going to your hometown to make sure you actually come from wherever you say you come from. So having my uncle call my mom to find out if their daughter had gotten arrested or something was an interesting episode.
I agree. So I think in all our experience with Bank of Ghana, one thing I realized too was the fact that they take the quality of the PSP's leadership team seriously. Even recently, they clarified that for the senior management team, they would only require that of the chief executive officer, the chief technical officer, the chief finance officer, and the compliance manager only to fill the personal questionnaire form, in addition to providing other relevant documents.
Yes, and I remember that as another implication of this process, we had to make some changes to our corporate structure. We discovered, for instance, that the new Companies Act, which was passed in 2019, had certain implications for us as a business. Example, the fact that you had to have a company secretary who had legal training is something that we tend to overlook, but all these adjustments had to be done whilst in the application process. So it's important to pay attention to some of these things whilst you are applying for the license.
So let me chip this in here. I think recently Bank of Ghana contacted us and told us that we'll need an independent director on our board. I think the purpose of this is for the person to provide objective, independent input in board deliberations. So for any PSP, this has even more implications when you're structuring your business. So it's something you should take note of.
Yes, very true. Very true.
Okay, so I think we have our fourth learning, which is on local content requirement. So what BOG takes into consideration over here is the fact that for foreign companies who want to operate in Ghana, they need to have a 30% local equity participation. And this also applies to local companies who are seeking for foreign investors. I think for us at Nsano, we had an easy walkthrough with this part because we are 100% Ghanaian owned. Okay, so there's a bit also that talks about shareholders. If you allow me to refer once again to the Payment Systems and Services Act.
Feel free, Linda. I think you can go ahead.
Yeah, it says that so for companies or for persons that have 10% or more, they will need to complete an attestation of ultimate beneficiary ownership by a notary public. From this, what I get from there is that for the BOG, they are putting in a lot of efforts to encourage local business participation, which I think is highly recommendable. So as a prospective applicant, you may need to pay attention to these requirements when structuring or receiving investments for your business.
Honestly, the licensing has taught us a lot about the payment space. For Nsano, with everything else that we do. We are essentially a mobile money aggregator, and we process a huge volume of transactions on a daily basis. So going through the process actually brings to the fore the knowledge that what we do is quite sensitive in the financial services ecosystem. And for us, it was a natural next step in our commitment to the stability and growth of the financial ecosystem in Ghana. So in order to go with these licensing regimes that we had to put in place processes to make sure our team are kept up to date with the relevant policies through training programs and other internal programs to keep the mindset fixed on what the implications could be for us. And this also helps us to remain organized such that we can be compliant. So some of these training programs are even organized by the central bank to keep all players in the industry informed.
Okay, before we continue, Linda and Solis, it seems like we're getting a couple of questions, and I think we should answer about 2 of them. So the first question I have here is, how long did the entire process take to finally getting your license? I think I'll take this question. If my memory serves me right, I think after we submitted the documents, it took us approximately 3 months to receive the license. Okay, and the second question I think we should answer is, someone would like to know, did you have to get ISO certifications prior to getting your license? Linda, I think this question is for you.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think it actually leads me to the next learning, which is on external certifications. So to answer the question, Priscilla, it's a yes. Nsano was ISO certified prior to the application process. And I would like to advise that for prospective applicants, we shouldn't underestimate the amount of paperwork involved in the licensing process. In fact, I'm unable to even overemphasize how important it is to plan and actually give yourself ample time to prepare adequately during your application review. So for every enhanced PSP, we'll need to have some external certifications in order to be licensed. So for us at Nsano, the ISO 27001 and PCI DSS were critical certifications that we needed to have. However, for PSPs who are looking at processing card payments, it's mandatory for you to have the PCI certification. I think you all know I handled this process, and
I remember.
I almost still have sleepless nights, when I remember what we had to go through. Well, so aside the processes and policies, capital investments and structural changes can also be very overwhelming. I remember vividly the number of times we had to change our organogram just to fit in the requirements. I think the good thing for all this is that for medium and standard PSPs, you can actually ride on an enhanced PSP's certification. Okay, so if you don't have your ISO certification or your PCI DSS now, you can ride on that of the enhanced PSP. However, for the policies, you'll not be able to ride on that of the enhanced. Every PSP is required to have clearly documented policies, which needs to be consistent with the way you run your business. Okay, so I think for the Bank of Ghana has highlighted some of the policies that are mandatory across, which are the data protection policy. We have that of the environmental risk management framework, an information security policy, and a compliance framework, amongst others.
Linda, at this point, I think I found this process quite intensive.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Let me ask you. So the team trainings and presentations we had on our policies and frameworks, were they required for the licensing process?
Definitely. Bank of Ghana requires that, and it's even extended to that of for the ISO certification for our PCI DSS and data protection as well. So I think I'll pause now so that Solis could take us through the data protection requirements.